So I'm going to break convention and start with a vote of thanks. So we're going to go through this in reverse. So first and foremost, my deep gratitude to the team of Hingori Sutras for inviting me on this platform and giving me an opportunity. The biggest thank you is reserved for all of you. Why? Simply because you have taken an investment call of investing your time to listen to a person who you probably know not much about. Time on this planet is a one-way investment because once you spend it, you don't get it back, which obviously means that I can pray and hope your take-home should be something that was well worth your time. I'm going to start with a brief understanding on the human mind. By its very essence, it's probably one of the most complex computers to understand, and its permutations and combinations can go into infinity. So let's get started. What makes us human? Three things, and that's pretty straightforward. What makes us human is the fact that we have a physical body, and there's absolutely no doubt about that. What also makes us human is the fact that with this physical body, we have a mind, no doubt about that too. And what also makes us human is that we have some life force, prana, soul, chi, call it what you may, which provides us with this bridge to function. If you extrapolate this to modern sciences, then you will completely realize that the human system is pretty much like a computer. Our body becomes our hardware, our mind becomes our software, and our soul becomes our power supply through the number of breaths that we come with. Well, the hardware, the body is pretty obvious. You have a hardware breakdown in your computer, you take it to IBM, a service center, you take it to a hardware specialist, and that's exactly what we do when our bodies break down. We approach the medical fraternity and we tend to set the body right. That's a biological established science, no issues with that. Power supply? Well, the power supply depends on the electrical circuit of the nation, and that's pretty much something that's beyond all of us in our conscious cognitive awareness. So the soul does what it does, it fuels your journey on earth. Which now brings me to the third variable, and which perhaps is the most interesting and yet the most complex variable in the story, which is the software of your mind. And probably using this analogy, it should be pretty obvious that how effective, how productive, and how efficient a computer is will depend on how beautifully and how extensively the multiple software programs that it carries are able to run. So let's try to decode this software that we call as the mind. So if I were to ask you, so what is your mind? Now you're going to think, and then if I start to get some answers, the typical answers that I'm going to encounter will be, oh, my mind is restless, or my mind thinks a lot, or that's how I feel and process things. My mind stores my memories. You know, these are the kind of replies that I mostly get when I address students on the subject. Now, if you just step back a little bit and evaluate this, because even at this moment, your mind is figuring out, how do I describe myself? And every line that I just spoke is a functional aspect of the mind. It's what the mind does. It's not what the mind is. So all of us predominantly understand our mind through its functionality, not through its structure. So what I'm going to do now is take you through a very brief exposition on the structure of your mind. And that would explain to you how it works. And once you understand how it works, all you need to do is crack the coding language, and life then becomes a series of non-stop miracles. Now, when we talk of the mind, imagine your mind as a ball of energy all around you, the center of which is the pit of your stomach. And that's how you get the term gut feeling. For example, I've got a gut feeling that it's going to rain in Mumbai tonight. Now, we all know that the gut is a physiological part of our bodies. It's where we digest and assimilate food. And there's absolutely no reason in this world why you should be feeling in the gut. And yet, what is a gut feeling? It's a very strong sense of intuition that's essentially coming up from the central part of our minds. Butterflies in the stomach. When you're sitting on a roller coaster or you do bungee jumping and you have this weird, crazy sensation with something fluttering in your stomach. Well, cut your stomach open, you won't find butterflies, you won't find eggs, you won't find nothing. So fear again is a very strong primal emotion that you experience in the central part of your mind. Let's decode this fear a little deeper. So this mind is divided into two parts. There is what we call as the conscious mind, and that's the mind that thinks, logics, analyzes, feels, decides, and eventually sanctions action, which pretty much means it's that part of your mind through which you are living life 24/7 into 365, because that's exactly what your life is all about. What you think, what you logic, what you analyze, what you feel, what you decide, and how you act. And strangely, this conscious mind is approximately 10 to 12% of the total mind capacity. Now, that would leave you scratching your head, because if all my life and everything I do with my life is being handled by this 10 to 12%, then has the planning commission that made humans goofed up big time? Because what's happening in the balance 88 to 90%? So the balance 88 to 90% is typically what we call as the subconscious mind. 88 to 90% indicating it's not only 9 times bigger, it's also around 6,000 times more powerful. So here is the first strange paradox of the mind. Here is an area of the mind that's nearly 6,000 times more powerful than anything that you've known before. It belongs to you. And therefore, it becomes that area of your life where you get the completely logical answers for all the illogical situations in your life. I think many of us at different junctions of our life have faced situations, have faced circumstances where we feel life is not logical at all. So many things in life just don't make sense. And then, of course, coming from a country like ours, which is very deeply seeped in spirituality, in religion, in beliefs, the most convenient defense mechanism is to put the entire truckload of what we don't understand onto karma and destiny. It becomes a very, very safe space to put away everything that we don't understand. But the fact remains that your life, the most logical game that you are playing with yourself across time and space. All you need to do is to know how and where to find the logic. If we go slightly deeper into the structure of the subconscious mind, the subconscious mind in itself, again, has two parts to it. There is what we call the primitive mind, and the primitive mind is that part of your mind where you store all your evolutionary memories, which means every single existence that you've had on this planet in any form is stored in the form of a DVD read-only format. So this is your personal library, this is your soul library, this is the history of the evolution of your consciousness, whatever you may choose to call it, and all those evolutionary records are embedded deep inside the primitive mind. This primitive mind also has two responses that we are all born with as a virtue of Darwin's theory of evolution. So in Darwin's theory of evolution, we understand that we've evolved from the primates, we've come from the animal base. And When an animal is faced with a crisis, there are only two responses that it demonstrates, which is fight or flight. We also carry the same two responses in our primitive mind, typically what you call as your survival instinct. So whenever you are faced with a crisis, you will normally do exactly what an animal does, which is either blindly fight or scoot or run. Over a period of time, as man evolved and started to become a little more intelligent and started to think, we also figured out that sometimes fight or flight doesn't work. So let's say as a primal man, like as a caveman, you're facing like a big bear who is a short distance away from you. Now in your mind, you're already computing the odds of what are the chances that you can defeat this bear in a fight? 0. What about flighting? Well, he's huge, he's big, and even as you take 4 or 5 steps, he will be right on you. And that's when man in his evolutionary process discovered a third response, which is, why don't I fall to the ground and pretend to play dead? Chances are high that if I play dead, the bear will come, sniff, and if he's not hungry, I might just escape. The tendency of playing dead in a crisis is typically what we call as depression. So when do we get depressed in life? When we are stuck in a crisis from which we cannot fight, we cannot flight, and so we get depressed. That's a part of our primitive mind. There are two fears that we are all born with: the fear of loud noises and the fear of falling. Every other fear is an acquired fear, and obviously what your mind acquires, it can always unacquire. Why are these two the only fears we are always born with? Well, this goes back to the origin of the cosmos, the origin of the universe, and the most popular scientific theory that seeks to explain this is called the Big Bang theory. Bang is a sound. It wasn't a small whimper. So the first impression in raw consciousness that came through creation was sound. Om, Amen, or Amin is the seed sound of creation. And that's imprinted in consciousness, hence the fear of loud noises. And with creation, with the Big Bang, also came your planets, your solar system, your galaxies, which are all held in a structure through a force that we call as gravity. And gravity is a pulling force. So that's the next experience that consciousness goes through. And hence, these two become very primal fears. They are ingrained in our system. So even if you can keep doing bungee jumping or cliff jumping or whatever you want to get those thrills, skydiving, you will always feel that hollow feeling at the pit of your stomach. So no matter how hard you try, of course, you can enjoy it, you can try to conquer it, but it is there. Coming to the other area, the modern memory. The modern memory is that part of your mind where you store everything about this lifetime, right from the time you take not only your first breath, but right from the time your soul comes into the mother's womb for the first time, which normally happens in the 4th day of the 4th month of pregnancy. And after that, the fetus is pretty much picking up everything from the womb of the mother. From our culture, from our mythological tales, from the Mahabharata, we know the story of Abhimanyu picking up the whole Chakravyu story as Arjun is explaining it to his mom. And then he goes to sleep, and so he can't crack it because he's picking it up absolutely being inside the womb of the mother. So consciousness starts to store impressions right from that time. And nothing disappears, including, for example, what was your father wearing when you saw him for the first time? You don't remember it right now simply because it's a question of out of sight, out of mind. You don't need to remember it, and so it's got deep down. But everything is stored there. Nothing disappears. Now, between the age of 0 to 8, between both these areas, that means between the conscious and the subconscious mind, a filter starts to develop. And this filter is called the critical filter or the critical mind. And this is where duality starts for a child. What do we mean by duality? A child starts to categorize things in opposites. I like this, I don't like this. This is fun, this is boring. This is good, this is bad. I will do this, I will not do this. So this whole paradox of good and bad, right and wrong, like and dislike starts with this critical filter. In fact, in a country like ours, which has such a deep religious or spiritual culture, we understand the difference between good and bad karma even before we know what is bread and what is biscuit, because that's the degree of programming that happens with us. What governs this programming? We call it the socio-economic, educational, and religious background in which you grow up. That's what makes this filter what it is. The filter or the development of the filter is not a right or a wrong process. It's a process. That's it. Just to give you a simple example, if I throw this question open to all of you, that how many of you steal money? Maybe a few of you as children did it. Maybe, I don't know, somebody may still doing it, no idea. But on the face of it, of course you don't steal money. Let's take this one step ahead. Why don't you steal money? Whereas actually, stealing money technically can be the easiest profession to engage in, right? Somebody else does all the hard work, somebody slogs. You simply go there and through a sleight of hand, through a trick, take the money and go, no problem. But you don't do it. Why don't you do it? Simply because in this age group, when we were between 0 to 8, our parents, our teachers, our belief, our faith, our religion, all these got together and hammered it into this filter that if you steal, the big boss up there is going to get pretty upset with you, and then he's going to completely jack your destiny up. And it's based on that fear that you don't steal. Fine. Let's flip the example. Let's say, for example, there's a child whose parents are pickpockets on the local train network of Mumbai. So both the father and the mother are doing pickpocketing. He's the only child, and the money that comes from pickpocketing is used for the child's clothes, for his fun, games. And naturally, when the child grows up a little bit, let's say he's 5 or 6 years old, the father is now giving him intense coaching classes on how he should flick a wallet. It's personalized. And every time he flicks a wallet and brings that wallet home, the dad gives him a reward, a hug, a kiss, a chocolate, love, appreciation, call it what you may. So for this child, where does stealing stand? It's a way of life, because according to his critical filter, he's doing it as an act of service to his parents, who are the physical, biological representatives of God on earth for him. So if you understand this, the first conclusion that you should draw about your own life and the lives of others is, don't judge the process of life. Life is not right or wrong. It is what it is, and it's different for different people. In fact, on earth, the law of judgment works faster than the law of attraction. So what you judge will come back to you really fast. So for God's sake, do yourself a huge favor. Stop judging other people's actions and behavior, because we have absolutely no idea what guides the background to make them behave the way they do. So how is this mind functioning right now? Probably a slightly more technical aspect to this. So the job of this critical filter is twofold. It judges events, and based on that judgment, it makes us feel a certain feeling. So whatever is happening in our life is coming in the form of input. That input is filtered through a layer of judgment. That judgment comes from our seer conditioning, socio-economic, educational, and religious conditioning. And based on that judgment, we start to link a positive or a negative emotional charge to every single event that happens in our life. How's the mind functioning now? Every word I'm speaking is being heard by your conscious mind. Not only that, At this moment, your conscious mind is also aware of your computer screen. It's also aware of the lighting in your room. It's also aware of the paint on the wall. Maybe it's aware of the background drone of either the air conditioner or the fan. So your mind is taking in many inputs even as you are listening to me. And this happens throughout the day. On an average, our mind is able to process roughly 4,000 message units in a minute. That's the quantum of information that your conscious mind is taking in. So this information is coming from the environment, it's coming from your body, it's coming from your conscious mind, it's coming from your subconscious mind. And all this masala mix is playing out essentially in your conscious mind. This information stays in your conscious mind for about an hour, hour and a half. And then after that, it starts to percolate through the filter where it starts to get judged, it starts to get categorized, and this process continues till you go to sleep. And when you go to sleep, in your sleep state, your subconscious mind database gets updated with files. This happens when we are sleeping in the night. The strange part, and this is something that you must carefully listen, for the subconscious mind, whatever it is that is known is pleasurable, and whatever it is that is unknown is painful, other than events that will physically kill you, because one of the mandates of the subconscious mind is to keep you alive. Death by itself is not a fixed destined moment, but the number of breaths that you come with is fixed. So how you use these breaths is going to determine which Mrityu Yoga in your life you will catch. Having said that, the subconscious mind in itself simply stores, doesn't judge, but for the subconscious mind, what is known is pleasure, what is unknown is pain. And this is the one thing that baffles many humans. I'll give you a simple example. Let's take an example of a girl who is in a household where her father is a very autocratic, egoistic male, typically what we call as the MCP personality. Very abusive, insults the mother, etc., etc., etc. Now, the girl child watches this and she's extremely upset with the father, maybe hates the father. However, from the subconscious mind perspective, what's happening? This behavior of the father, this arrogance, this rudeness, becomes the known behavior of a man, because the father is the first man in a daughter's life. The first exposure to masculine energy comes from the father. So though she consciously hates that behavior, that is the known behavior of a man. Now what happens? As she's growing up, she wants to run away from home. She wants to have nothing to do with that father of hers. And yet, the very first boyfriend that she'll attract in her life when she goes to college, eventually and slowly will become a Xerox copy of the father. The person she gets married to will duplicate the same pattern. The son she gives birth to, if she doesn't crack this, will also end up behaving the same way. And why does this happen? Simply because for that 6,000 time world's most powerful Xerox machine, that is the known behavior of men for her. So the unconscious God in her is constantly going to manifest men in her life who are going to be rude, who are going to be autocratic, who are going to be dictatorial, and though she may hate it, she will keep manifesting it over and over again. And unfortunately, this gets labeled as destiny. Of course, why she chose that father is a fact of destiny. But with awareness, that can be shifted. With awareness, learnings can happen. With awareness, we can supersede this. So the long and short of the model then becomes the fact that bit by bit, we are building a database. For this computer to function absolutely effectively, the critical filter needs to be cleared. That should be obvious. You know, it's like the filter that you use for tea. The tea leaves must be removed. And this filter gets cleared either when you go to sleep, or when you meditate, or if you do self-hypnosis, or if you do breath work. So this will now explain to you why, for example, people like to meditate, or people like to go into trance, people do breath work. What is eventually the biggest benefit of that? The benefit of that is you're clearing the critical filter, which is giving the computer a chance to start functioning effectively at high speed all over again. It's exactly how you run virus programs and keep cleaning all your softwares like a McAfee or a Norton antivirus. Because that critical filter, if it gets jammed, is exactly what's going to land up creating a huge mess in your life. Maybe just a short protocol on the dream sequence, since we're talking about mind, and the mind is also linked to our dream state. So whenever we go to sleep, the updation of the database in our mind is happening. I've already explained that. In the first 2 hours of your sleep, the dreams that you get are called processing dreams, and these are extensions of what's happened through the day. So for example, let's say you're at work and your boss has given you a bad time that day. He's firing you for something or the other. The visual of him firing you will get stored into your modern memory at the moment it gets created, because your modern memory is highly visual in nature. The fear that you feel with the boss's firing will get stored in your critical filter. And after that, when you go to sleep in the night, that fear will get appended with the visual of the boss firing you. And this will translate as a scary dream in your night where you feel you are running in a forest with a dragon spewing fire on you. That's a processing dream. In the middle 2 hours of your sleep, you go through a predictive dream where your mind tries to tell you that if you continue doing what you are doing, this is where your life is going to go. So for example, let's say I've worked hard in my life and I've made a decent amount of money, and I now decide to take a sabbatical, take it easy. I quit and I go on a sabbatical journey. Let's say I take off to Hawaii and I decide to chill there for a few years. Well, chilling in Hawaii for a few years costs money. So every time I'm using my ATM card to withdraw money from the ATM, not only is the money coming out from my bank, but it's also coming out from my mind. And my mind is keeping track of exactly what's happening there. So after 6 months in Hawaii, in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock, I probably will get a very scary dream, which will show me probably with an unshaven beard, with slightly tattered clothes, and with a katora in hand, a metaphorical projection of poverty. And it'll scare me to the extent that I wake up in the morning and I said, all right, I need to get a job, and I'm back on monster.com, because my mind is telling me that if I continue to withdraw money like this and don't replenish my earning, I'm going to be in trouble. Those are called as predictive dreams, and they normally wake you up in the middle of the night. And finally, we have venting dreams, which are what happened in the last 2 hours of sleep when we're about to wake up. And that's when the mind is letting go of beliefs, of files, of data, of information that it no longer requires. From a therapeutic perspective, of course, we interpret a venting dream as opposite of what it's trying to tell us. So for example, if there's a person who has a fear of public speaking and comes to me for a session and I'm working with that fear, it's quite common after 1 or 2 sessions for the person to wake up with a dream in the morning saying, I blanked out on stage in my dream and people were throwing tomatoes at me. I celebrate, because that means the session is over. The person in the morning state has let go of that belief that he is going to blank out in front of a crowd. A dream, of course, is different from a vision, because many people believe that what they see in the morning turns out to be true. That's not a dream, that's a vision. And a vision is time travel. That's what happens when, in our sleep state, our subtler self comes out of the body and we move forward in time approximately 10 to 15 days on a daily basis. So that's from where the sense of deja vu, etc. comes. A vision is very literal in nature. A dream is metaphorical. Having explained this, eventually, to summarize this structure or this part of the mind's working, in your conscious mind, you have the rules of life. In your subconscious mind, you have the experiences of life. And your life operates on both these wheels, your rules and your experiences. When your rules and your experiences are in harmony, life is beautiful. When your rules and your experiences clash, is the origin of stress in life. Just to give you a simple example of this, at one point of time, your rule says it's fine to eat non-vegetarian food. This is just an example, okay? And you enjoy it. So you build many positive experiences of non-vegetarian food. And then one fine day you decide to go vegan, or one fine day you decide to go vegetarian. For some rhyme or reason, you go through some shift and you change your rule. You change your rule to say, all right, from today I don't eat meat. But what happens to those zillions of positive experiences that are already there? So the next time you go to a buffet in a 5-star hotel, your rule is saying no meat, no meat, no meat. So you go to the Ghaspus counter, you take the salads, etc., etc., etc. But no matter how much salad you eat, you don't get that full feeling. And the moment you're crossing the counter where chicken tikkas are being prepared, and as the smell goes up your nose, and the craving starts to come up. And after round 1, round 2, the moment your willpower dips just a little bit, incidentally, willpower works for approximately 2% of the population. So if you're not in that 2%, the moment you get a trigger, you are back to the same experience, because the experience is 6,000 times more powerful than the rule. And that's why we find change in life so difficult. It's the rule versus experience conflict. Now, that being the case, the key in life is how to clear those experiences. And even when people are meditating, people are doing deep inner work, trance work, this is the area that they are trying to vacuum clean, to cleanse, to let go, to cathartize. Because, as I said, it's the world's most powerful duplicating machine. So much so for the human mind. Let's take this one step deeper. For your mind, everything starts from a thought. Depending on how your mind perceives the thought, that thought becomes a moving energy that we call an emotion. This emotion is perceptual. To give you an example, if I tell you, let's process the thought that one human is killing another human, is it a positive thought or a negative thought? Many of you will say, oh, it's a negative thought. Well, let's add one filter to it. Let's assume that the person doing the killing is the security guard of your building, and the person getting killed is probably a terrorist who's carrying 100 kilos of Semtex that were going to be placed just below your car in the basement of the building. And if this killing hadn't happened right now, you'd be a dead duck in the next 10 minutes. Now, is it a positive thought or a negative thought? Well, usually positive. You want to meet the security guard, you want to touch his feet, he's your God, he's your savior, etc., etc., etc. On a different context, different tangent, the person getting killed is a friend of yours, the person doing the killing is a murderer. You're very upset, you're very angry, you're sad, you're frustrated. So please remember, thoughts are potential energy. Thoughts by themselves have no ego. Thoughts by themselves have no texture. A thought is just a thought. It's the most basic building block of this universe. Each one of us, based on our critical filter, has an antenna, and that antenna perceives the thought in a certain way. This perception of thought charges it with electromagnetism. This charged thought particle now becomes a moving energy, which we call an emotion. An emotion is an energy in motion. Now, since you have charged the thought, where is this emotion going to come? It's going to come right to you. And how does it enter you? It enters you through the energy vortices in our body that we call as the chakras. And once the emotion enters the chakras, through the chakras, the emotion gets into your DNA, your brain, your organs. And as we all know, the DNA is the collective substance that manufactures reality. So as you think and as you feel, so shall you become. Remember, Aham Brahmasmi. When I say I am the Lord and Master of my universe, I am constantly creating my universe through the texture of my own thinking and my own feeling. Vivekananda has a very beautiful quote on this, saying, be very, very careful about what you think and what you feel, simply because you are today exactly as a byproduct of what you have thought and felt before. And the way you will think and feel today is going to set you up for your destiny of the future. The mind uses the thought to control your causal body, or what we call as the Karan Day. The mind uses emotions to control your astral body or your Sukshma Sharir. The mind uses the chakras to control your aura, your energy body or your etheric body. And finally, the mind uses the brain to control your physical body. So if you realize at several levels, your mind is the invisible body, the body is the visible mind. The two are not separate from each other. Everything that starts from a thought finally ends with the reality of your physical self. How you create your physical reality around you is also the byproduct of the texture of thoughts and emotions that you are constantly processing. And then to perhaps give a holistic closure to this much of understanding, I'm going to end with the concept of the higher self, because we are talking of decoding destiny. We've already understood that a lot of what we call as destiny are repetitive programs of the subconscious mind that we ourselves have set up. There are a few things in your life that become completely fixed, and where do these get fixed from? So this is a very simple model that seeks to explain that. This is a water bottle. So if I were to ask you, does this plastic have energy? Yes or no? Now you're going to be scratching your head and say, well, does plastic have energy? Yes, no, no, yes. Does this duster have energy? Yes, no. Do I have energy? Well, bottom line is everything has energy. How do we know this? Simply because all matter is made up of molecules. Molecules are made up of atoms, and atoms have protons, neutrons, and electrons. And the electron in the atom is in a state of perpetual motion. And no movement is possible unless it has energy. So everything is energy. There's this smart dude called Albert Einstein who created the theory of relativity, E is equal to mc squared, which means energy and matter are interconvertible at square the speed of light. So there is energy everywhere. Energy is there in you, in me, in the table, in the chair, in the computer, in the water bottle. Everything is energy. And yet, the table is not the water bottle. Why? Simply because the vibratory rate is different. So what separates us from each other, though we are all energy, is the vibratory frequency of consciousness. That is different. The vibratory frequency of the electron is different. So if we understand this, then the entire cosmos around us can be seen as an expression of energy vibrating at different frequencies. And that's exactly what I've drawn here. This line that you see is a line that represents all the possible vibratory frequencies of the cosmos. Science divides this line into two parts. All those frequencies of energy that science can tangibly measure, qualify, quantify, prove, establish, or accept at a given point of time is what science calls as physics. And all those frequencies of energy which science cannot tangibly measure, qualify, quantify, prove, or establish at a given point of time falls in the area of what science calls as metaphysics. And this line keeps moving with time. Just to give you an example, 1,000 years back, if I was on this planet and I made a statement that said there's a force in this planet that keeps all of us stuck to it like a magnet, the intelligentsia at that time would have said, okay, Yuvraj, please dig a hole in the ground and show us where is this power. When can we get to it? 1 year, 2 years? I would keep digging for many years, not find anything, and they'll put me into that hole and bury me, and then I would be history and a mystery both. And yet what happens? 400 years back, when the apple falls on Newton's head, what do we get? We get the law of gravity. Gravity was always there. But since there was no technology to prove it, it was metaphysical. Now, Newton proves it, line goes up, gravity becomes physics, law of gravity. 100 years back, aura, metaphysics. Today, so many people, so many softwares, photograph it, physics. And that's why every invention is called a discovery. Discover means discard the cover. Remove the cover, remove the veil. So metaphysics is all of creation. What we understand out of that is our physics. Let's look at where each one of you and me is right now. We are all in physics. Why? We have a body that science understands. We have a mind that science acknowledges. And every doctor in this world will tell you that there is a life force which they cannot control. They're very clear on that. We may call it the soul, prana, chi, but there is something that keeps this body going. So we become this body, mind, vitality, package deal accepted in science as physics. Now let's understand what happens when we die. Depending on our belief system, our body will either be cremated or buried or put into the water or fed to the vultures. It's a religious protocol. No matter what your faith or belief, at the end of the day, this body is a 5-elemental carbon-based structure, which is the 5 elements are going to go back to the 5 elements. So that is the end of the science of the body. We're now left behind with the energy of the mind and the energy of our vitality or vital living force. The first law of thermodynamics in physics tells you that energy cannot be created, nor can it be destroyed. It can only be transformed or transmuted. And yet, at my death, science now has no technology to be able to prove the existence of either my mind or my vital living force. Science itself says that you can't create it and you can't destroy it. So what happens? Your mind and your vitality become metaphysical. According to science, the state of your soul mind in the metaphysical zone is what we call as the higher self. So if the character down here is the lower self or the Jivatma, the character up here is the higher self or the Paramatma. The higher self is not your boss. It's you without the drama of your ego. It's you in the overview. It's you that is above the time and space drama that's happening on earth. And every time you incarnate on earth, a part of the energy of this higher self comes down into the body and you go through these cycles of life and death. Everything that we call as life plan, life choices, life purposes are byproducts of processes that are happening at this level. Whatever you call as your destiny or fate are decisions for evolutionary purposes, karmic purposes, the rules of life that are happening here. And all that you are doing here is implementing it correctly. If you follow the coding of your life correctly, then an enormous amount of resources from here open up for you. On the other hand, the more you fight it, the more it will fight you. So think wisely, feel wisely, and make your life count for you.